It was an ordinary afternoon in the city. The sky was bright, with clouds drifting slowly as the sun cast a soft golden glow across the busy streets. Emily, the mayor's teenage daughter, had just finished her classes for the day. She was cheerful, walking with two of her closest friends, Sarah and Mia. They had decided to stop by a small cafe near the school before heading home. It was their routine whenever they wanted to enjoy a little break after long hours of study. The cafe was cozy, filled with the smell of fresh coffee and baked cookies. The three girls laughed over small stories, sharing inside jokes and chatting about their weekend plans. Emily had always been a quiet yet confident girl. She carried herself with grace, but she was also down to earth. Even though everyone in town knew she was the mayor's daughter, she never acted entitled. She was simply Emily, a kind girl who loved spending time with her friends. After finishing their snacks, the girls stepped out into the street. The sun was lowering slightly, making long shadows stretch across the road. Emily said goodbye to Sarah and Mia, as they each went in different directions toward their homes. Emily, with her school bag slung over her shoulder, began her short walk back to the mayor's residence. The streets were calm, filled with the usual rhythm of city life, bicycles passing by, children laughing as they played near the sidewalks, and shopkeepers closing their stores for the evening. Emily was humming a tune when suddenly a police car slowed down beside her. She noticed it out of the corner of her eye, but thought little of it at first. Police cars were a common sight in the city, but the car came to a stop and the door opened. Out stepped Officer Daniels. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried an intimidating presence. His uniform was neatly pressed, but his eyes held a stern, almost cold expression. He walked quickly toward Emily. "Hey, you there!" He called out in a sharp voice. Emily stopped, startled. She turned around, unsure why he was addressing her. She adjusted the strap of her bag nervously. "Yes, officer?" she asked politely. Daniels looked her up and down with suspicion, as though she had done something wrong. "What are you doing out here? Where are you coming from?" His tone was harsh, almost accusing. Emily's heart began to beat a little faster. She was surprised by the sudden interrogation. I just came from school, sir. I was at the cafe with my friends. I'm heading home now," she explained softly. But Daniels didn't look convinced. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against the side of his belt where his holster was. People nearby began to notice the scene. A few pedestrians slowed down to watch, sensing tension in the air. Emily's mind raced. Why was this officer questioning her so aggressively? She hadn't done anything wrong. Daniel's voice grew louder. "Don't lie to me. I saw you walking suspiciously. What's in your bag?" Emily clutched her school bag tighter. "Just my books and notebooks, sir," she replied, trying to stay calm. The officer's eyes narrowed. Without warning, he pulled his gun from the holster and raised it in her direction. Gasps filled the air around them. A woman across the street screamed and covered her mouth. A man who had been unloading boxes from his van froze in shock. Emily's entire body stiffened. Her breath caught in her throat. She couldn't believe what was happening. The cold metal of the gun glistened under the sun as Daniels aimed it straight at her. Emily's knees weakened. She felt as if the ground beneath her had disappeared. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Some shouted, "Put it down!" Others pulled out their phones, recording the horrifying sight. Emily's voice trembled as she whispered, "Please, I haven't done anything." Her words were almost drowned by the pounding in her ears. She could hear her own heartbeat, loud and uneven. Her fingers clutched her bag tighter. Though she wished she could just vanish into the air, she thought of her father, her mother, and how worried they would be if they knew. She thought of Sarah and Mia, who had just waved goodbye minutes ago, not knowing that something so terrifying was about to happen. The officer's eyes were cold, his hand steady. "Show me what's in that bag now," he barked. Emily slowly moved to open the zipper, her hands trembling. She was terrified that any sudden movement might push him over the edge. The bag unzipped with a soft sound, revealing only books, papers, and a pencil case. The bystanders shouted, "She's just a kid, and she has nothing." But Daniels didn't lower his weapon. Emily's lips quivered and her knees threatened to give way. Tears formed in her eyes, not from weakness but from sheer fear. She had never faced anything like this before. A shopkeeper ran out from his store, holding his phone high as he recorded. "Put that gun down, officer." "She hasn't done anything," he yelled. Cars passing by slowed, their drivers honking in disbelief. People gathered, forming a circle at a safe distance, their voices rising in anger. Emily stood frozen, her eyes wide and full of fear. She had always believed police officers were meant to protect, but now she felt the opposite. She was vulnerable, standing in the middle of the street with a weapon pointed at her chest. Seconds felt like hours. The crowd grew louder, their voices blending into a chorus of outrage. "She's innocent! You're going too far! Lower the gun!" Emily's tears finally rolled down her cheeks. She whispered softly, more to herself than anyone else, "I just want to go home." The officer's grip didn't waver, but the pressure of the crowd began to mount. Several people continued to film, their cameras capturing every second. The atmosphere was electric with shock, anger, and fear. Everyone knew something serious had just happened, something that could never be ignored or forgotten. In that moment, Emily felt her world shift. What had started as a normal afternoon with friends had turned into a nightmare. She realized her life could change forever because of one man's reckless choice. Her heart pounded as she prayed silently for this nightmare to end. And though she didn't yet know it, the videos being recorded around her would soon spark outrage across the city and beyond. This was not just about her anymore. It was about justice, about accountability, and about standing up against something much bigger than herself. The street was filled with tension. People could hardly believe their eyes as the officer kept his weapon pointed at Emily. For a moment, it felt as if the entire city had stopped breathing. The sound of horns in the distance, the chatter of people on the sidewalks, and even the footsteps of pedestrians seemed to disappear, replaced by the loud heartbeat of fear in everyone's chest. Then, almost all at once, the voices of bystanders rose. "She's innocent!" one man shouted. "Put the gun down!" cried a woman. A teenager standing near the crosswalk lifted her phone higher, recording everything. Another man who had been walking his dog ran toward the group and yelled, "This is too much!" Emily stood frozen, her lips quivering. She wanted to scream, but the fear held her silent. The metal of the gun shone under the fading sun, and in her eyes it felt like the weapon carried the weight of the world. Her school bag slipped slightly off her shoulder, but she held it tightly with one hand, too scared to let it fall. The shopkeeper who had first spoken out stepped closer. His name was Mr. Lopez, a kind man known in the neighborhood. He ran a small grocery shop and often saw Emily passing by after school. His voice was louder now, trembling with courage. "Officer, she's the mayor's daughter. She's just a child." "Don't do this!" At the mention of mayor's daughter, the crowd gasped even louder. Whispers spread quickly through the group. Everyone knew the mayor. He was respected for his honesty and care for the people. To think that his own daughter was being threatened like this shocked the city to its core. People pulled out their phones in greater numbers, some calling family members, others dialing the police department to report what was happening. Emily's friends, Sarah and Mia, were already far down the street when they heard the commotion. Sarah, curious and worried, hurried back and froze in terror when she saw her friend standing still with a gun pointed at her. She screamed Emily's name, rushing forward, but others stopped her, afraid it might make the situation worse. Mia, shaking, pulled out her phone and quickly called Emily's mother, her voice breaking as she explained what was happening. Within minutes, social media began to light up. Videos spread rapidly with captions like, "Officer aims gun at mayor's daughter," and "Young girl threatened without reason." Thousands of people shared it, tagging local news channels. Anger spread like fire. People commented, asking how such a thing could happen in broad daylight, in the middle of a busy street. With so many witnesses, Emily's father, the mayor, was in a meeting when his assistant rushed in holding up a phone. His face turned pale when he saw the video. The blood drained from his cheeks as he recognized his daughter's terrified expression, standing helpless under the shadow of a weapon. He didn't wait another second. The mayor stormed out of the office, his phone pressed tightly to his ear as he called the chief of police. His voice was firm, filled with a mix of fear and rage. "I don't care what it takes, get that officer off the street right now. My daughter will not be another victim of reckless power." Meanwhile, on the street, the crowd grew. People who had been passing by stayed, unwilling to walk away from what they saw as an act of cruelty. The sound of chanting began to rise. "Put it down! Put it down!" echoed through the area. Cars slowed down, drivers leaning out of their windows to record the scene. A bus stopped nearby and passengers pressed against the windows, shocked by the sight. Emily's knees trembled, but she tried her best to stay upright. She wanted to be strong, even though fear clouded every thought. She whispered a quiet prayer in her heart, begging for safety. Every second felt stretched as though time itself refused to move forward. Finally, another police car arrived. Two younger officers jumped out, alarm on their faces when they saw Daniels holding his weapon at a teenage girl. They quickly shouted, "Lower your gun, Daniels!" Their voices rang across the street, commanding but desperate. The crowd cheered when they saw the backup arrive, but the tension didn't leave. People knew this wasn't over. Emily, still frozen, didn't dare move until the officers carefully pulled Daniels back and lowered his weapon. Her legs gave way and she sank to the ground as her friends rushed forward, hugging her tightly. Tears rolled down her face, her body trembling from the shock of the ordeal. That night, every news channel played the video again and again. Anchors spoke with disbelief as they described how a police officer had pointed his gun at the mayor's daughter without cause. Emily's frightened face became a symbol of something larger, the fear and unfairness that many people had been speaking about for years. The city reacted with fury. Hundreds gathered outside the police station, carrying signs and chanting. Some read, "Justice for Emily," while others declared, "End abuse of power." Families came with their children, saying they didn't want to live in fear of those meant to protect them. Students from Emily's school organized a march, carrying her picture as they walked through the streets. The mayor stood before the press that evening. His voice was calm but carried deep pain. "My daughter is safe tonight, and for that I am grateful. But this is not just about her. This is about every child, every parent, every citizen who deserves to live without fear. No badge, no position gives anyone the right to harm or threaten the innocent." His words struck the hearts of many, and applause broke out among the crowd. Emily, though shaken, tried to rest at home. Her mother stayed by her side, holding her hand and whispering soft words of comfort. But Emily couldn't stop replaying the moment in her mind. The sharp voice of the officer, the cold barrel of the gun, and the way her knees felt weak under the weight of fear. She hugged her pillow tightly, tears soaking the fabric as she whispered, "Why me? What did I do?" Across the city, people stayed awake talking about the incident. On social media, hashtags calling for justice trended all night. News vans parked near the mayor's house, eager for any update. Experts appeared on television, condemning the officer's actions and demanding accountability. The city was no longer calm. A storm had begun, fueled by outrage, grief, and a demand for fairness. Everyone knew this was only the beginning of a long battle. And in the center of it all was Emily, a young girl whose life had been turned upside down in a single afternoon, and whose courage would soon inspire a fight for justice far greater than she could ever imagine. The next morning, the city was still buzzing with the shocking event. Everyone was talking about Emily and the officer who had aimed a gun at her. The videos had already been seen millions of times. Some showed Emily standing frozen, her hands trembling, while others captured the anger of the crowd shouting for the officer to stop. No matter which angle people watched, the truth was clear. Emily had done nothing wrong, yet she had been treated like a dangerous criminal. The police department had no choice but to respond. By sunrise, an internal investigation had been launched. News reporters stood outside the station, speaking into cameras while officers hurried in and out of the building, refusing to answer questions. The city's police chief, a serious man named Captain Harris, gave a short statement. He promised that the department would review the case carefully. His words sounded calm, but his eyes revealed worry. He knew the whole city was watching, and one wrong move could destroy the trust between the people and the police. Inside Emily's home, the atmosphere was heavy. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the officer's face, his cold expression, and the weapon pointed at her chest. Her mother sat by her side, holding her hand, while her father, the mayor, moved restlessly through the house, speaking to lawyers and officials on the phone. When Emily finally spoke, her voice was soft. "Dad, why did he do it?" "I didn't do anything." The mayor's heart broke hearing his daughter's words. He knelt beside her and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "You didn't, sweetheart. You were innocent. This wasn't your fault." His voice was steady, but inside he was boiling with anger. He had promised the people of the city that justice would always stand above power, and now, justice was demanded for his own child. Meanwhile, Officer Daniels sat in a small office at the station. His badge had been taken away temporarily and his gun was locked up. He tried to explain himself to investigators, saying that Emily looked suspicious, that he had been acting out of caution. But his words carried little weight against the evidence. The body cam on his chest had captured everything. There was no sign of danger from Emily, no reason for him to pull his weapon. Other officers whispered in the halls. Many of them had known Daniels for years. Some admitted privately that they weren't surprised. He had a history of complaints from the community. People had accused him of acting unfairly, especially toward minorities and young people. Each time the complaints had been brushed aside with little punishment. But this time was different. This time his actions had been caught on video, and the entire world had seen it. At school, Emily's classmates gathered around her empty desk. She had stayed home that day, still shaken by what had happened. Some of her friends cried quietly, while others spoke with anger. "If this can happen to her," one student said, "then it can happen to any of us." The teachers tried to calm the students, but even they couldn't hide their concern. The mayor decided he would not use his influence to quietly settle the matter. He wanted the case to go through the system, like it would for anyone else. At a press conference, he stood in front of flashing cameras and microphones. His voice was strong. "This is not only about my daughter," he said. "This is about every citizen. If an officer can point a gun at a child walking home from school, then we must face the truth. Something is deeply wrong. And it must be fixed." The people cheered his words. Protesters outside the police station held signs higher. Their chants grew louder, echoing through the city streets. For the first time in a long time, people felt united, not divided, demanding accountability and change. The investigation moved quickly. Detectives reviewed Daniels's body cam, the street cameras, and the dozens of videos taken by bystanders. The evidence was overwhelming. Emily had done nothing but walk down the street. Daniels had no reason to stop her, no reason to accuse her, and certainly no reason to pull his weapon. Emily, though frightened, found the courage to speak to investigators. Sitting at a long table, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, she recounted every detail. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were steady. "I thought I was going to die," she admitted quietly. "I didn't understand why he hated me so much. I was just walking home." The room grew silent after her words. Even the investigators, trained to remain professional, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They could see the truth written all over her face. Meanwhile, Daniels tried again and again to defend himself. He said he had thought she might be carrying something dangerous in her bag. But each time he repeated his story, it sounded weaker. The investigators reminded him that she was a child, carrying only school books. His excuses collapsed under the weight of undeniable proof. As days passed, the city's tension only grew. Protest marches filled the streets every evening. People carried candles and pictures of Emily, chanting for fairness. Families brought their children to the rallies, wanting them to see the importance of standing up for what is right. Some even told stories of their own encounters with Daniels, describing times he had treated them unfairly, but had faced no punishment. The mayor listened carefully to these stories. He realized this case was larger than his daughter. It was about the entire community. Emily's courage to speak out gave others the strength to share their experiences. News reporters covered every angle of the story. National channels arrived, interviewing citizens, showing the marches and demanding answers from the police department. Experts on television explained that if this case was not handled fairly, it could break the fragile trust between law enforcement and the public. At home, Emily slowly began to find her voice again. Though the fear lingered, she told her parents she wanted to speak publicly about what had happened. "If I stay quiet," she said, "then it's like saying what he did was okay." And it wasn't. Her parents hesitated at first, worried she wasn't ready. But when she finally stood in front of cameras, her message was clear. Dressed simply, her voice soft but determined, she said, "I was scared for my life. But I know others have felt this too, maybe without anyone noticing. I want to say this. No one should have to feel that way. Not me, not anyone." Her words spread quickly, touching the hearts of millions. People admired her bravery, her ability to speak out even after such a frightening ordeal. Across the nation, her face became a symbol of hope and change. But as the investigation came to a close, the pressure built. Everyone knew the next step would be the courtroom. Daniels would have to face trial, and the entire city waited with anxious hearts. For Emily, the waiting was difficult. Nights were still hard, and sometimes she woke from nightmares, her breath quick and shallow. But each day she grew stronger. Each time she saw the support from the community, she felt less alone. She realized this was bigger than her personal pain. This was about a fight for justice that had been waiting for far too long. The investigation team finally announced their decision. Daniels would be charged and sent to trial. The crowd outside the courthouse erupted with cheers, waving their signs high in victory. Emily, standing beside her parents, felt a spark of hope. The battle wasn't over, but the first step had been taken. And deep inside, she promised herself that she would not let fear define her. She would walk forward, not just as the mayor's daughter, but as a voice for fairness, for courage, and for every young person who deserved to feel safe in their own city. The day of the trial finally arrived. The city that had been waiting with tense hearts was now gathered around the courthouse. News vans lined the streets, their antennas raised high as reporters prepared to broadcast every moment. Citizens stood shoulder to shoulder, some carrying posters with Emily's face, others with signs that read, "Justice for all." Everyone knew this trial was not only about one girl, it was about fairness, responsibility, and the kind of future they wanted for their children. Emily sat inside the courthouse, her hands folded in her lap. Her parents sat close, her mother's arm gently around her shoulders. She tried to stay calm, but her stomach was tight with nerves. She remembered every detail of that day, and now she would have to share those memories in front of strangers, lawyers, and a judge. The thought made her palms sweat, but she also knew it was necessary. The courtroom filled quickly. Journalists scribbled in notebooks, their cameras flashing as the doors opened. Lawyers shuffled papers while the crowd hushed to a low murmur. Officer Daniels walked in wearing a suit, his head held stiffly, though his eyes darted nervously around the room. He looked very different without his uniform, but to Emily, the sight of him still made her heart pound. She whispered softly to her mother, "That's him." Her mother squeezed her hand tighter. When the judge entered, everyone rose. The trial began with the prosecutor, a calm yet firm woman named Ms. Carter. She stood tall, her voice clear as she addressed the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "this case is about trust." A young girl, innocent and unarmed, was walking home from school when an officer of the law pointed a loaded weapon at her without cause. The evidence is undeniable. The videos, the body cam, and the voices of witnesses will show you the truth. And the truth is simple. This officer endangered a child's life. The courtroom was silent, every word echoing off the wooden walls. Next, the defense lawyer, Mr. Blake, stepped forward. He tried to speak confidently, though his eyes flickered nervously. "This case," he said, "is about misunderstanding. Officer Daniels acted in caution, not cruelty. He believed he saw something suspicious and made a judgment in the heat of the moment. We must remember that officers face danger every day. His intention was not to harm, but to protect." Some in the audience shifted uncomfortably, whispering to each other. To them, the defense's words sounded weak. Still, the trial had to move forward. The first witnesses were called. A shopkeeper, Mr. Lopez, described what he saw that day. "She was just a girl with a school bag," he said firmly. "There was nothing dangerous about her. I've seen her pass by my shop many times. That officer had no reason to pull his gun." Other bystanders followed, their stories lining up perfectly with the videos that played on a large screen for the jury. The courtroom watched in silence as the footage showed Emily standing frozen, her face pale with fear, while Daniels held his weapon steady. Gasps filled the room, even though most had already seen the video before. Watching it in the quiet seriousness of the courtroom made it even more powerful. Then came the moment Emily had been dreading. She was called to the stand. Slowly, she walked forward, her shoes clicking softly against the floor. Her father gave her an encouraging nod while her mother mouthed, "You can do this." Emily took a seat, her hands folded tightly together. Ms. Carter smiled gently at her. "Emily, can you tell us what happened that day?" Emily's voice was soft but clear enough for everyone to hear. "I was walking home from school. I had just left the cafe with my friends. Then Officer Daniels stopped me. He asked me questions, and before I could answer, he pulled out his gun. He pointed it at me. I was so scared." Her voice shook slightly, but she continued. "I thought I might not live to see my family again. I kept thinking, why me? I hadn't done anything. I was just carrying books in my bag. A hush fell over the room. Jurors leaned forward, their expressions heavy with sympathy. Even the judge's face softened as he listened to her words. The defense lawyer rose for cross-examination. He tried to sound calm. "Emily, is it possible you moved in a way that made the officer feel threatened?" Emily shook her head firmly, her eyes steady. "No, I was just standing there. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe too fast because I was afraid he might shoot." The lawyer pressed again. "Are you sure you didn't say anything or reach for your bag quickly?" Emily's lips quivered, but she remained strong. "I am sure. I was too scared to move at all." "Everyone there saw it." The defense lawyer hesitated. His words fell flat against the weight of her testimony. He returned to his seat, his shoulders slightly slumped. Next, the prosecution revealed Officer Daniels's history. Complaint after complaint was read aloud, each one describing similar behavior: aggressive stops, harsh language, unfair targeting. In the past, he had avoided serious consequences, but now those records became evidence of a pattern. The jury listened carefully, their expressions grim. Finally, it was Daniel's turn to speak. He stood, his voice steady at first. "I was just doing my job," he said. "I thought she looked suspicious. I had to protect the community." But under pressure, his words began to crack. When asked why he didn't lower his gun even after seeing only school books in her bag, his voice faltered. I wasn't sure," he muttered. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. By the end of the day, the jury had heard enough. The evidence was strong, the testimony clear, and the videos undeniable. Emily left the stand, her legs weak but her heart strong. She had spoken her truth. As her parents hugged her tightly, she whispered, "I did it." Her father kissed her forehead, whispering back, "You were brave, my girl. Very brave." Outside the courthouse, crowds chanted late into the evening. They carried candles, their lights glowing like stars against the dark sky. Reporters shared updates every hour, their voices filled with the gravity of the moment. The entire city knew that the verdict would soon be announced. And for Emily, though the fear still lingered, there was a new feeling growing in her heart. Hope. Hope that fairness would win, hope that no other child would face what she had faced, and hope that her voice had made a difference. The day of the verdict finally arrived, and the city felt as if it was holding its breath. Everyone had been waiting for this moment, the moment when justice would either be served or denied. News vans lined the streets, their cameras trained on the courthouse steps. People gathered outside, holding signs that read, "Justice for Emily and no one is above the law." The air was filled with anticipation, tension, and hope. Inside the courthouse, the courtroom was packed. The jury sat quietly, their faces serious as the judge called the court to order. Emily sat beside her parents, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. Her heart was pounding, and a soft tremor ran through her body. She had faced fear before, but this was different. This was the moment when all the evidence, all the testimony, and all the courage she had shown would finally be weighed. Officer Daniels sat at the defense table, his eyes scanning the room nervously. His suit felt tight, and each passing minute seemed heavier than the last. He tried to look calm, but even a casual observer could see the tension in his jaw and the sweat forming on his brow. The judge cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict?" The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with a serious expression, stood. "Yes, Your Honor, we have." A hush fell over the courtroom. Emily's mother held her daughter's hand tightly, while her father's grip on her shoulder was firm, though his heart raced with nerves. Every eye in the room was fixed on the jury as the foreperson continued. "We, the jury, find Officer Daniels guilty of misconduct and endangering the life of a minor," she said, her voice steady and clear. The courtroom erupted. Some gasped, others whispered in relief, and a few clapped quietly. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She could hardly believe it. After all the fear, all the stress, and all the moments of doubt, justice had finally been served. The judge nodded solemnly. "Officer Daniels, due to the severity of your actions and the evidence presented, this court sentences you to 2 years in prison. Additionally, your conduct as an officer has been deemed unacceptable, and you will face permanent suspension from the police force." Daniel's face went pale. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. The weight of his actions, the years of complaints, and the overwhelming evidence finally caught up with him. For the first time, he realized that authority could not protect him from the consequences of his choices. Emily let out a long breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her knees felt weak, but her heart was full. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she turned to her parents. Her mother hugged her tightly, whispering, "You did it. You were brave, Emily." Her father, proud yet emotional, added, "You helped show the world what's right and what's wrong. I am so proud of you." Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted in celebration. People cheered, held up their signs, and hugged one another. Emily's friends, Sarah and Mia, ran forward, hugging her so tightly that she could hardly breathe. "You were amazing," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "You spoke up and you made a difference." Mia nodded, tears in her eyes. "We are so proud of you, Emily. You didn't let fear stop you. You stood strong." The mayor, standing at the front of the crowd, raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Today, justice has been served, not because of power or position, but because truth and courage prevail. My daughter showed all of us that standing up for what is right is never wrong, no matter how young you are." The news spread quickly. Television channels ran segments with Emily's story, highlighting her bravery and the importance of accountability. Newspapers carried headlines praising her courage and the verdict that followed. Social media was flooded with messages of support, not just for Emily, but for the idea that no one, not even a police officer, is above the law. Emily returned home later that day, exhausted but relieved. Her room felt safer now, a place where fear no longer had power. She placed her school bag neatly on the desk, the same bag that had been a part of the terrifying incident, and looked out the window. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over the city. It felt like a symbol of hope after the dark hours she had endured. Her parents sat beside her, sharing stories of the day and reflecting on the journey. "Emily," her mother said gently, "you showed everyone that bravery is not about being fearless, but about standing up even when you are scared." Her father nodded, adding, "And you reminded us all that doing what is right is always worth it. You helped change the city and maybe even the country by speaking your truth." Emily smiled faintly, tears still glistening in her eyes. She had been through so much, but she had learned something important. Courage could inspire change, and one voice, even from a young person, could make a difference. Over the following weeks, the city began to heal. Discussions about police conduct, fairness, and accountability became central in local schools, community meetings, and city council gatherings. Programs were created to train officers in proper conduct, and Emily was invited to speak at some of them, sharing her story to help others understand the impact of their actions. Emily's bravery did more than bring justice in a single case. It sparked conversations that would help protect countless others. People in the city felt safer knowing that there were systems in place to hold those in power accountable. They also learned the importance of standing up, recording and reporting wrong actions no matter who was involved. Months later, Emily looked back on that day with a mixture of emotions. Fear, yes, but also pride and relief. She had faced something no child should ever have to face, yet she had emerged stronger. She spent time helping local youth understand their rights and the importance of community support. She also spent quiet evenings with her family, cherishing the moments of peace that now felt so precious. The officer, Daniels, began his sentence in prison. The city continued to watch closely, making sure that justice remained consistent and that no abuse of power could be ignored. For Emily, seeing the system work as it should restored a sense of faith in fairness and law. She realized that even in a world where mistakes and cruelty could happen, courage, truth, and justice would always have a place. Years later, Emily's story was still remembered. Children were taught about her bravery in schools. Community leaders spoke of the power of speaking out, and citizens often cited her example when discussing fairness and accountability. Emily had not only survived a terrifying moment, but had turned it into a lesson for the entire city. A reminder that courage could shine even in the darkest moments. At the end of the day, Emily would often walk the same streets she had walked that fateful afternoon. She remembered the fear, yes, but she also remembered the bravery, the community support, and the sense of justice that followed. She knew that what she had endured and overcome had made the city better and stronger, and in that she found peace, knowing that her courage had changed lives, inspired hope, and reminded everyone that truth and justice are worth fighting for.